Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Space UK's event and to the first session, which I've got the privilege of hosting. The first session is entitled The New Society and the Future of Mixed Use. 12 months ago, talking about a new society, we might have imagined something that had evolved or was evolving relatively slowly. But as has been widely discussed, one of the consequences of the pandemic is that the timeline for change, whether that's the way we work, we shop, we interact with others, the way we spend leisure time has been really compressed. The pace of that change has been ignited by the pandemic, and many of the behaviours that we had 12 months ago now look quite quaint, rigid, or dare I say, a little embarrassing. I love change. I know that some people struggle with it, and real estate by its very nature takes a little bit of time to catch up. And we're going to talk about that today. How does real estate, and in particular mixed use, respond to the post-pandemic society that we're going to find ourselves living in? And in particular, what does it mean for all those city centres and town centres that Constantly talked about? Now, I don't have all the answers, but I do have three people joining me today whose experience and roles make them uniquely positioned to help us try and navigate towards this new horizon. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Anna Bond. Anna is an executive director at Grosvenor, responsible for the development activity at Grosvenor. Hi, Anna. All sorts of things that Anna's been working on, biscuit factory, we're talking about South Molton Triangle. And Anna, what I think is going to be interesting talking to Anna about is that Anna gets the fact that it's not just about financial return anymore. When we're looking at these mixed use developments, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we need to very much have in focus. Anna is chatting to us from the top floor of her flat in Battersea, which is far more exciting than a basement in Barnes, let me tell you, where I've been plugged into a computer since last March. In addition to Anna, we've got Will Colthorpe. Will, good morning.
Good morning.
Hello. Will's been at Argent for over 12 years, and Will leads their mixed use team, responsible for leasing at King's Cross. Will's also chair of the BPF Development Committee. Will, I can't remember where you're joining us from, but it's somewhere far more exciting than Barnes or dare I say Battersea.
So I am in my dining room in the Burbs in sunny Sutton.
In sunny Sutton. Well, it's great to have you with us. And finally, Sophie van Oosterom. Sophie, good morning.
Morning. Sophie
has just joined Schroders as their global head of real estate, following a number of years at CBRE Global Investors. Now, I'm afraid that Sophie's going to make you all very envious because she does win the award for speaking to us from the most glamorous place. Sophie, where are you?
I'm speaking from Bloemendaal, which is a little town near Amsterdam, but it's very close to the beach.
Oh dear, what we'd give to be on the beach. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nigel Mapp. I set up a property management company a few years ago, wanting to do things a little bit differently. We seem to have done that. We went into the pandemic, funnily enough, with 300 people. We're now sort of nudging close to 450, which I guess sort of illustrates the challenges of managing a £15 billion portfolio during a pandemic rather than anything else. So it's been a little bit bonkers. Before we get into the detail, I thought we'd sort of, start a little bit softly, and I thought I'd ask my three guests about some of the perils of working from home, and what has either caught them out or been an embarrassing moment over the last 10 months or so, or what they're particularly worried about this morning. What may happen this morning that may cause disaster to reign? Anna, have you got an embarrassing moment or a peril about to happen?
Yeah, funnily enough, mine was yesterday where I forgot that we're all working from home, and I was on a call with a colleague and I asked them, something that, of course, they're not going to know anything about, but they sit next to the person in the office who's doing it. And so I said, "Oh, you haven't overheard what's happening on this particular thing." And as soon as I said it, I thought, "Of course he hasn't overheard. Nobody's sitting next to anybody they work with."
No. Sophie, anything happening in the Netherlands? Falling over buckets and spades?
Lots of rides around here, but they don't start until about 5 o'clock in the afternoon these days. So no, that's all fine. My biggest peril is, as you just mentioned, I started in my new job and started that in the London office for the first day on the 4th of January, and immediately got the announcement of the further legal lockdown. And so I almost had to flee the country to make sure that I wouldn't get stuck, which hasn't really happened. I think borders are still open, but my perils are interacting with my new team via this medium rather than in person.
Good. Will, what disasters have beset you?
Well, I mean, lockdown's been pretty grim for a lot of people. Luckily, we're okay. We have a little toddler, and the fun thing that's happening at the moment is we're potty training him, so he keeps leaving little presents around the house for us. So that's the one thing I may need to rush off and deal with at some point in the next period, just to let you know.
Okay. Well, hopefully the peril that befell me yesterday when I was talking to Sophie doesn't happen. We definitely need a little bit more bandwidth on our broadband, and the BT engineer turned up and just took the line out. So I was mid-conversation with Sophie where it just suddenly ended, and that was it. And I found a man up a ladder. So hopefully that doesn't happen today. So the other sort of question I had, sort of intro question, given that we're talking about the new society and mixed use, is to ask you which estate, which mixed use development are you aware of or have been to that you think is really well set for this new society post-pandemic? What's going to thrive? Anna, is the one that you have in mind? Preferably not your own.
Yeah, okay. So, if I was going to say one of my own, I would have said Eccleston Yards, but on the basis it's not my own. Actually, I'd say Battersea Power Station. So it's relatively local for me. I've really missed it during these lockdowns, and I think what I think makes it is going to make it really successful is it's right next to Battersea Park, so it's got lots of green space. It's got a very good amount of restaurants, so you don't always need to have made a reservation. You can kind of gradually find one, but also the fact that there are real people who are living there now, even now, as well as a really significant amount of office space. And I think having people who really live there will be one of the things that makes it very successful, as well as its proximity to that green space that attracts other people.
Okay. Will?
Yeah, I've got my eye, if we're not allowed to go for our own, I've got my eye on Wood Wharf, because I think over there you've got an outfit that has got tremendous experience over the decades of developing estates and have sort of have seen what's happened and what's gone well, not so well. And I think that's a really good springboard into the next generation of regen. Caveat if we're not allowed to pick our own.
Good. And Sophie, what about you? Here or mainland Europe?
If I can choose one, mainland Europe, I'll describe it because I don't think a lot of people will have been there. That might change. There's a very interesting multi-sector development ongoing in near Amsterdam, and I think it's going to be the biggest place where things will be happening. It's a shopping centre with offices around, resi on top, but it's got a very interesting cultural history, in that it was subject to a lot of uproar in the 80s and 90s. There was a plane that actually crashed in the area, destroying quite a bit of the area in the middle of Amsterdam. And it's rebuilt itself from that with a very diverse cultural group of people that live there. So there's artists there, There is a great community of various people from various different backgrounds. And as a result of that, it's really built itself around different uses for the buildings as they arose, not so much as a normal town centre with some retail around and then some resi, but really integrated art centres, schooling, residential, social housing, upcoming eclectic mix of people, surrounded by what would be best described as a Canary Wharf type of office environment. But the mix of it is an interesting one.
Cool. Good. Well, we're going to try and explore five different areas, and they all sort of overlap. So it'd be good to see where we get to. We're going to talk about the high street and the reimagination that's required there. We're going to talk about sustainability, obviously. We're going to talk about flexibility. These are all the words that I seem to be spending my life talking about at the moment. Brand and identity, and we're also going to talk about agility as well. Let's kick off with high streets, because I think that's where so much of the discussion is taking place. What are these high streets going to look like? What are these retail centres that have been decimated going to look like? And you know, what's the radical rethink that's required? Anna, what conclusions is the radical rethink going to come up with?
Well, I suppose the high street has been evolving for hundreds of years. Obviously, Grosvenor is over a 300-year-old company, and so I suppose we would consider that we've been kind of pioneering new thinking for 300 years. But I read this morning that 16,000 shops closed last year in the UK. And what that means is the high street is going to have a radical change and really needs to adapt. And I suppose from a landlord perspective, the way that we're looking at it is twofold: is what's the high street going to do? But also, how is the relationship between landlord, tenant and its communities going to evolve? And we think really the model that needs to come out of this is a model of mutual success. So what I think that really means for landlord-tenant relationships is they're going to need to be different. Before, you would look at a tenant, look at their product, decide whether you liked it, and did a deal. And now you really need we're going to need much better understanding of our tenants' businesses. What does bricks and mortar do for their business? As well as how does their business demographic help the rest of the high street? So, we're in a relatively unique position where we have control over lots of streets, but obviously Argent do as well. And so we're looking at how do we approach retailers differently. So, because actually, I suppose what we're all trying to do is create a really successful ecosystem that works for the community, the retailers, but also the landlords. So I think we're going to see more turnover rents, and as well as kind of more innovative ways of attracting retailers. So we've just set up something we're calling the Tenant Investment Fund, where essentially we're offering loans to retailers to come to our streets, where we can support them through a loan around fit out and other things that would have traditionally been barriers. And that's particularly useful for us because we think independent retail is going to be one of the drivers of the new type of the high street. Because I suppose one of the things that lots of high streets have suffered from is this kind of homogenous offer. And so having a high street that is more independent and also has more kind of amenity as part of it, whether that be a you know, leisure activity in a traditional high street setting. I think we will be seeing more of that, but the relationship between landlord and tenant, I think, is going to radically change as well.
Sure. And Will, what's it going to physically look like? And as explained, you know, sort of some of the concepts, but physically, what are our high streets going to look like in 10 years' time? They're going to look smaller, bigger, smarter, wastelands, all of the above?
I mean, yeah, high street's massive topic. I mean, you know, whole conference is devoted to that at the moment. Obviously, we're going to see, from our experience and what we're forecasting on our mixed-use developments, probably a huge amount of investment in the public realm. We've seen, we've had real big learnings over the usage of public realm during lockdown and the openings of that. I think that's here to stay, converting high streets into just more activated spaces and places. You know, Anna touched on some big stats earlier. I mean, I think it's Savills who were saying, you know, potentially 3 million square feet less retail in the UK by 2030. I mean, that's huge, huge, huge changes. I mean, we're going to see interesting learnings around dark kitchens, about last mile delivery. There's been some interesting changes to the planning system this last year or so. We're yet to see how that bears out. You know, we're seeing Amazon take up space in basements and car parks. We're seeing startups like Wheezy. We're seeing delivery logistics. So I think we've got all that to come. But, you know, for us, we tend already to be working with independents, and that gives us a real opportunity on our estates to work with them and to really just sort of, you know, learn with them as we go, which I think we're finding really fascinating. It's been a really interesting year of all years, and going forward next year, I think we're also quite lucky for us against some others where we don't have the legacy of lots and lots of retail on really long leases, so we can actually be quite agile in how we're tuning ourselves. And I think that's a really important consideration for people in the property industry to be thinking about going forwards. So just a couple of things, but I mean, huge topic. We could go on for days about this.
Yeah, the whole session, couldn't we? One of the things that certainly I've noticed, and I know has been much talked about, is that actually it's not all doom and gloom for retail. That there are certain areas where, you know, there is, you know, a thriving market. I mean, local shopping, for example, seems to be thriving. Has anyone got, you know, anything to add to that?
I mean, there's a big move at the moment around 15-minute cities, and in Sweden they talk about 1-minute cities. So that's a real great thing. Looking at that, I mean, we have kind of that idea at King's Cross embedded already, but for us, we're looking down the barrel of our Brent Cross town development we launched recently, and that's another 20-year regeneration scheme. And we're absolutely looking at all this stuff where you've got shops, leisure, culture, education, healthcare, recreation, just everything within a walkable distance. And we think that's going to be really important where you're living, working, playing, or what have you, you know, in the real estate market and in terms of high streets and retail and leisure and that offer.
Yeah. Let's talk about flexibility. And Anna, you've talked a little bit about the need to be flexible. You've already spoken about the loans to occupiers, which I think is absolutely fascinating. But we talked the other day about also just on the commercial element about commercial offices and what it means, what this you know, the pandemic means for flexibility and flex space. And I think, you know, you mentioned that Grosvenor actually took back some space that you'd let to an operator to try and directly manage it. Is that an area that you think is going to expand? Is there appetite in the funds and the owners of real estate to do that and to enter that space directly?
I mean, I think you're right that flexibility is going to be the for all occupiers going forward. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get shot by saying I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be in the office 5 days a week, even as an office developer. And so we are going to need to build buildings that are more flexible and also offer the legal piece that is more flexible as well. So for offices, I think that means space that can be relatively easily subdivided, but also if you're going to be subdividing it, you can still create best-in-class office space, because I think in terms of what the office is going to be doing for us all, it now needs to be a really attractive place for people to come to, because that businesses are going to want their people to be, when they're all together, really wanting to be able to share ideas, collaborate, culture, all things that we all talk about all the time now. But businesses are also going to need to be able to expand and attract. And what you don't want to do is to be in substandard space as a result of wanting to be agile and flexible in the way that you occupy. So I think there's going to be need to be a big push on the M&E side to really enable that flexibility. But also I think sustainability is going to be a big part of it. And I suppose when I talk about sustainability, I'm kind of putting together wellness in as part of that as well, so that we can ensure that the wellness continues as people use buildings differently.
Sophie, I think you've got some thoughts on the future of flex space and owners doing it themselves. That seemed to be something you focused on in a previous role. Maybe a reduced role for operators and an increased role for owners. You just want to talk about how you see it developing.
Yes, absolutely, Nigel. I think the point that you made at the start on the opening, saying that COVID has actually brought a number of changes to the forefront, a lot quicker, a lot of trends moved into sight. And for offices particularly, I actually believe that the landlords will have the opportunity to take back some space or take back some of the upside that the flexible office operators seen earlier on. They've been able to take quite a lot of the market share and take some of the upside of providing flexible services to their tenants in the market as it was until 2020. As they have become more of a victim as well from signing long leases and possibly being subject to shorter leases on the other end, we see them retracting from the market a bit, but actually the occupancy rates within those flexible offices are still pretty good. And the underlying trend, as Anna talked about as well, is actually for the tenant to want more flexibility, want more adaptable space, and maybe want a different kind of contract as well. I think that the times of 10-year contracts are probably over. If we look at the leasing market today in London City as well, the demand for space has also changed. People are asking in their RFPs for more flexibility, adaptability of the total amount of space they want. They look for different kind of flexibility in their contracts. So if we come to the flexibility the landlords can provide is actually filling that in themselves, being a more of an operator towards the ultimate tenants, understanding the business needs from the tenants and think around different forms of contract, not just in adaptable space, not just in environmental elements that need to be brought into the building, but also on the contractual side. How can we facilitate what a tenant needs in their business model? And almost use I think in a hotel type of mentality, a hospitality mindset, bring that to the space. A hotel mindset, if I could spend 1 second on that, they look at their tenant base and they look at their model as they have leases for one day. They constantly need to interact with their tenant base, which are the ultimate people coming to the hotel, entertain them, make sure that the space provides the right services and the right level of interaction, and the tenant can do, the client can do what it needs to do in the office. We as landlords of offices need to apply that same mindset to our tenant base and our flexibility, and learn from that hospitality mindset on how we deal with our office tenants. So the operational excellence for landlords becomes sort of the skill for the future.
We're all nodding in agreement, I think. So I think we're all united on that. Let's come back to sustainability a little later. Let's quickly talk about brand and identity, because I think that feeds in very well to the hotelization of commercial property, because in hotels there's different brands, and they might be owned by the same owner, but you choose a brand and you go to a brand because you know that you're going to get a consistent feel and level of service when you go there. Will, can you talk a little bit about the importance of brand, particularly in relation maybe to King's Cross and Brent Cross, and maybe other things that you've come across as well, where how do you see the market developing and that side of things working out?
Yeah, so you started out this conversation asking us what our favourite unbiased opinion of mixed-use estates was, and I think we've had tremendous success with the King's Cross brand these last 15 years. If you were to sort of reel off talking about place brands, we started at the same time. Wembley, Chiswick Park was out there, Stratford was coming forward, King's Cross, and we've all of those developments. We've all had to meet different challenges on the branding, and from our experience, it can be quite a slog, getting brands out there, making them stick, making them work. It was quite interesting. Obviously, looking across Quintain, they obviously gestated TP, and they've converted that to Quintain Living most recently, which has been quite interesting to see how different people approach brands out there. But for us, typically we see, it's really important to come up with a clear and compelling vision, stick to it, deliver on your promises, keep momentum, and really make sure that the brand does embody and have flexibility around the values, the change, the sorts of things we've been touching on in this conversation today. So 15 years in on King's Cross, it's been quite a journey. First 5 years was a real challenge, trying to shake off the historic conception and perceptions of King's Cross. The second 5 years, we got momentum, and the last 5 years have really been seeing things delivered into what you see, know, and love from when you would have all visited it most recently. And that's something that we're just on the outset of that journey for Brent Cross Town. Everyone on this listening today will probably have their own perceptions of what Brent Cross means to them, just like they did have perceptions of what King's Cross meant to them 15 years ago. But it's a really exciting sort of time and challenge to kind of look ahead and to sort of develop our experience and work through this. We love it, we relish it. But that's just about place brands. We haven't really talked around companies bringing out sub-brands. There's a whole raft in the BTR segment. When we talk about flexibility just now, there's a whole raft in the flexible leasing, the commercial leasing space sphere, I would say. And I'd say in those spheres, it's even more of a challenge to find a point of difference, arguably. We've seen a whole rash of things come out these last 3 years. So I think it's been quite interesting in terms of competition. Yeah. Whereas for us, our experience is, we're so longitudinal about things that we can just grind away, work away, build. One
of the most interesting things in my work is that we get to work with 60 or 70 different clients, and they've all got a slightly different view about life and real estate. And what's interesting is there is definitely a developing divide between, and I'm thinking here more about the funds, that are trying to work out how they make their product, cool and have an identity and attractive to an occupier base. And there seems to be a divide between, and I have to say they're in a minority, those that think the fund name, so, Grosvenor offices or Schroders, having the brand is important, versus those who think actually it's a property level. Forget the Schroders brand, people, or the Grosvenor brand. People are not going to come to us because we're Schroders or Grosvenor, but they will come to us at building level. Anna, Sophie, have you got any thoughts on that?
I think it's probably both, actually. That tenants will always be attracted to the best buildings and the best landlords. So, and particularly in this environment where we've got a lot of change going on, if you were a great landlord 10 years ago, doesn't mean anything now. You need to be a great landlord today. And you also have to have the best buildings. And I suppose I would consider best buildings to be buildings that tenants really want. And so I think we need both, that everybody needs to be working on their landlord proposition. So, and I loved what Sophie said about the one-day lease. It's a great way of thinking about it. We've all got to work on our landlord proposition as well as our real estate proposition, and the branding of developments probably needs to incorporate all of that. And what I've seen recently is sustainability has really gone up the agenda the last few years, and lots of people are trying to differentiate themselves in terms of sustainability. And there's a lot of challenges around the understanding of sustainability to enable people to do that really effectively. So I would probably say it's three: property, landlord, as well as sustainability. Okay.
So if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with what Anna was saying, but just wanted to add to it. I guess when you're talking about brand of Schroders or Grosvenor, you talk about the commitment to making indeed the sustainability within a building up to that the best it can be. If you talk about what you want to show in a building itself, I think the building is very important because there's different requirements of a building depending on its location. So if you just choose one brand to have a one-size-fits-all, I think you're missing the purpose, missing the point around what we're trying to achieve. You need to understand what the 10 requirements are for a specific building, and that's what it needs to be targeted towards. So a brand can be a brand over all the buildings can actually be stifling that. So it's a combination of having a brand, understanding a brand of the building, and having the commitment behind it from the ultimate landlord.
We weren't taught any of this at university, were we? It really is a whole new world where, the skill set is now so varied and wide. We do find ourselves working thankfully with experts that do understand that whole world. Anna, you mentioned sustainability, and we've got another 10 minutes or so to go, and sustainability is huge. I mean, it is, it's almost dominating, the conversations that we're having at the moment, which is great. Sophie, we work with Schroders. We know that sustainability is right up there. Probably the most important thing at the moment. Why is it so important to not only Schroders but other funds?
Yeah, within Schroders, without making this a marketing pitch, but I think it's truly ingrained in all of the processes, all of the thinking. It's very much at the front of mind for a long time already, as is with many players. But why so important? I guess one, morally, we have an obligation towards our planet, our future generations, to be responsible participants and use of limited resources. We just look at the environmental impact of the sustainability element. Sustainability covers more, obviously, but looking at that point. Secondly, the World Economic Forum has highlighted, and they do a study on risks every year, and it covers political risk, it covers economic risk. For 2020 and 21, the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 largest global risks in terms of likelihood are related to environmental issues. And so I believe as asset managers, we have a fiduciary obligation to really are aware of, to manage and to proactively look after and manage these risks and try to mitigate them and report on them transparently. Thirdly, and I'm not saying that in the order of importance, but we believe with the focus of ESG and the sustainability supports or ultimately even enhances investment performance. And I think as a result of the factors I just mentioned, but specifically given the Paris Accord that we've all agreed to, this drives really clear goals and objectives and enhanced transparency and reporting and regulatory requirements, obviously with the SFDR coming into play. What that means is that it's at the forefront of investors' minds, it's at the forefront of tenants' minds, it's at the foreground of all of our employees' minds, of where they want to be, what buildings they want to own, which buildings they want to occupy. And so if you think about that longer term, the buildings that don't comply with the sustainability goals that we set ourselves will become obsolete. And as a result of that, there will not be any performance with that. Now, obviously, that's looking into the future. But if we look quickly at what the equity markets are showing us for that, if the amount of investment into sustainability in sustainable companies on the equity stock exchange has tripled over the last year. And I think we've had a good example to see over the last year what performance has been versus non-sustainable and sustainable companies. The index shows that sustainable companies have actually outperformed consistently over the last 3 to 1 years on their performance because of their income, because of the income they regulated, and because of the performance they've shown as their companies. That's not just in real estate; that's across the board. Yeah. So I think there's more and more evidence building in all the sectors that our focus on sustainability will ultimately bring performance as well.
Good, thank you. That's a good overview in real estate generally. Will, what are the particular challenges of driving sustainability in mixed-use developments?
So I think the challenges, particularly, I mean, we in our developments are doing pretty well. I mean, by example, by April this year, we are on track for King's Cross to be a carbon neutral estate. And in that process, the main challenge we found is about embodied carbon in the buildings. We found it difficult to get all the way to the bottom of the supply chain to just get the proof, get everything right. That's our main challenge. I think other elements of it, actually, we found pretty easy. That there's a real supply chain out there for the rest of it. But it's something we're really looking at and really keen to push forward. I mean, my own view is that, you know, whether projects and companies, in the next 5 years, if you are not able to demonstrate a route to zero carbon, then you're just not going to be an investable proposition. That's what we're finding from funders and lenders, and it's also becoming something our customers are expecting and wanting out of us as well. So that really is going to be a challenge, just making sure it's so embedded in what we do. So that was what I'd say on this. Yeah. Okay. And Anna, some of the challenges on phased developments, you know, things like the development around South Malden Street, you know, that must have particular challenges as well when you're doing it in phases. How do you manage that?
With great difficulty. I mean, yes, at South Malden Triangle, you know, we've got buildings that are going to be operationally net zero, with very low kind of embodied carbon, with very small amount of offset. But the challenge, as you're saying, is when you're developing phased buildings, is that often to be able to get the good sustainability credentials, actually you need a holistic system which works when you've designed 2, 3, 4 buildings on plan. But actually when you need to deliver the first one, often what that means is you need to deliver the first one with all with all the kit, and then you effectively plug the second one in, which then inevitably means you then need to go back and do some works to the first building. But I think that real drive for sustainability is going to be critical, as everybody said, in terms of what tenants want and desirability of the product from an investor perspective. But I think one of the challenges is actually going to be about bringing our agent community with us. So, I mean, I've been on a massive sustainability learning curve over the last 18 months, and that's my day job. And for many of our leasing agents, we're going to need to really help them understand what all the net zero, embodied carbon, offset, all the rest of that means, because you could claim to be zero carbon and hardly do anything from a sustainability perspective and just offset the lot. Well, that's not really what we're all into. You know, what we really want to be able to do is kind of reduce emissions both through the supply chain and operationally, increase the amount of renewables that you've got either on site or access to. So signing up to green energy and then doing the offset as the absolute last resort. But you can relatively easily claim that you're zero carbon by doing nothing of the renewables or trying to reduce emissions and just offset the lot. So what we're going to need to be able to do, probably actually as an industry, is help our agents to help their customers, so our tenants, understand what good really looks like, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know, so the people who are really striving for sustainability, that it's understood how well they're doing and why their buildings are better than others.
Sure. No, I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. We are all going to have to go on a learning curve. I think, you know, here on this panel we have, but you're right. The whole community's got to go on that learning curve and speak with authority about it, because it is going to be a number one question, or maybe a number two question after, you know, what's the rent? It really is. We've got a couple of, you know, very short period left, a couple of minutes left. Let's just quickly talk about agility and traditional companies. And in some ways, you know, we're all traditional companies, having the ability to capitalize on new opportunities. We'll, you know, King's Cross trailblaze that with all sorts of, you know, different uses, St Martin's and everything else. How does that work? How does that work commercially?
Well, I mean, you know, it's kind of simple, really. You know, we've got huge regeneration schemes, and they attract, you know, you've got huge floor space to work with. So overall, you know, you're looking for all comers, you're looking for anchors, you're looking for things. So commercially, it works. But on agility, there's something actually that I think is probably quite important to bear in mind, and we've seen this over the last couple of years. That I think we're going to see a continuation of this. Is that, I mean, traditionally, like, okay, there's lots of agility, tech companies, you know, lots of things happening. As property companies, maybe we can be blamed for being a bit slow in the context sometimes. But what we have seen is increasing diversity in the C-suite of organisations. You know, chief digital offers, chief transformation, chief innovation, and I think we're going to see more of that. I think that's going to allow propcos particularly to be a lot more agile in responding to things over the next 5 years. So that's my view on agility, Nigel.
And has anyone got a view on the infrastructure and the sort of the planning position? Is that going to be, you know, even if we become the most agile, you know, sector on the planet, what are the structural things that are going to hold us back? Or do you think everyone is now so well aligned with the need for change that it's going to happen, that people are going to be a lot more flexible and agile?
I suppose those that aren't embracing it are just going to get left behind. You know, if you are only offering a 10-year lease to an office tenant, you're going to be in trouble pretty quickly. So I think that the agility is going to be the thing that means you if you adopt it early, thrive, and if you're adopting it in the middle, survive. But if you are not agile and you continue to want massive fat leases for small periods of time, people are just going to not bother and go to somebody else.
Sure. And thinking more about local authorities, faced with the death of a high street, are they agile enough? How do we get to work with local authorities to pedestrianise high streets, or to convert space that's no longer fit for use as retail into something else? I mean, I know that's a huge issue in itself, but is that potentially a blockage, or is there a real eagerness to see that change?
I think it depends on the people who are in the council. If you've got people who understand the need for change and what they need to do for their community, they will enable their organisation to get there. I mean, one of the very few positives of COVID has meant that there's no denying we are in a crisis, and councils need to do something to help their communities get out of it. And so this kind of crisis has created an urgency which may actually help the high streets and communities faster than if we had a kind of slow burn platform.
Cool.
And us setting the example as well. I think we can help as private landlords, or where we can, to set the example of where we can bring change, and show what the benefits of that would be, even if that means an additional investment in the communities, to make them more vibrant.
Good. Well, thanks all. We are really out of time, and I'm sure that you need to go and do other fun stuff. So Will, I'm not sure what you're going to find. Sophie's got to go and jump in the sand dunes. Anna, I don't know what you're going to do. Maybe walk up to Battersea, see what's open.
Find
and
some
to all of you, that have been listening, I hope that was enjoyable. I know one that Space does really well at a normal event is great coffee breaks with great food. I'm sorry that's not on offer, but I'm sure you'll be able to rustle up something out of the fridge during your coffee break before the next session. So thanks, Sophie, Will, Anna. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.